Story 1. My friend's ex-girlfriend would constantly ogle other guys, but God forbid he so much as glanced at a woman. Additionally, she was jealous of his male friends and did not want him hanging out with them. He lost more than one buddy because of that. Story 2. Assuming the person you work with is happy to handle all the heavy lifting and unpleasant customer interactions simply because you do not want to and he is male. Story 3. I feel like my time isn't valued, as if I have all the time in the world to assist others with their problems. However, when I need help, I receive no response. I often feel like I am in a competition over who does more. I mentioned to my wife that I did the dishes, and she responded by saying she washed them twice and cleaned the stove. It seems unnecessary to compare our efforts. It also bothers me when you talk about me to your friends. I know I drank 4 beers yesterday afternoon, but your friends don't need to be informed about it. Story 4. Being suddenly explosive, especially in public, can be dangerous. Overreacting draws attention and makes others think you need help or that you may be a danger to yourself or others. It is also very immature and disrespectful. Story 5. I always disliked being treated like a free source of labor or that anything I wanted to do was unimportant. Some women behave as if anything a man has going on is a waste of time because it is not beneficial to them. Story 6. I don't like this behavior. It makes me feel bad. You need to stop doing it, or it means you don't care about me or my feelings. There is no consideration for his feelings, no room for discussion, and no reflection on whether her feelings are reasonable or fair. It's simply, I feel this way, so you have to accommodate my feelings. This situation is commonly observed in marriage and relationship discussions. Story 7. When someone is wrong in a disagreement, they often start to control the tone of the conversation. It doesn't matter if we are correct and they are at fault. If we do not express it in an acceptable manner, our feelings or points may not seem to matter. Story 8. I see many wives openly expressing discontent with their partners in front of friends. It is a strong indicator of a failing marriage. I am not saying they will separate, but the marriage is in decline. It is quite obvious. Story 9. Excessively praising male celebrities in my presence is fine, but when a man compliments one woman, it becomes an issue. Story 10. Gossiping with your friends about problems in a relationship or things said to you in confidence is one of the fastest ways to lose trust. If we wanted your friends to know, we would tell them, or at least give you the go-ahead to discuss it with them. Story 11. I have had about 6 jobs total since I was 15 and I am now 39. This does not include music gigs. At every job I have been hit on, groped, propositioned, grabbed, or kissed by either a female coworker or boss, sometimes more than once. I have even been threatened not to tell anyone on a few occasions. No one seemed to care. There was no recourse with management or human resources, and no apologies were offered. I just had to adjust to the fact that sometimes women would make advances, and I could get in trouble if anyone found out. Those I confided in outside of work assumed I was bragging about the attention from these women. I understand that men behave this way too, but we rarely discuss how often women, especially those in positions of power, engage in similar behavior. Story 12. I remember my friend's wife would often say hurtful things to him when we all hung out together. You dumb idiot. You're so stupid. Dumb. I felt so bad for him, but he allowed her to speak to him like that. They eventually divorced. Story 13. The skepticism about the idea that they could be as bad as men is concerning. I have heard women unintentionally repeat the same sexist arguments used against them to downplay or outright deny actions that they have identified as problematic when men do it. Story 14. I've had many women hit me and think that it's acceptable. I don't know whether they believe it's fine because I'm a man or because it's socially unacceptable for me to respond in kind. Either way, I don't like it. Getting hit triggers my internal leave me alone response, so to avoid escalation, I just leave if it happens. I had a girlfriend do this in college and I warned her about it. When she did it again, I stood up in front of all our friends, put on my coat, and left, leaving her to explain. Story 15. Chronic lateness. My current girlfriend is never on time to meet me and claims to understand that it's disrespectful, yet she is still late. After 5 years, it finally dawned on me why she is constantly getting sidetracked. I think she needs to increase her attention deficit hyperactivity disorder medication dosage. Story 16. Assuming they are always more emotionally mature than men is completely misguided. When you call them out on it, they just say, "See, I was right." This is delusional at best. Story 17. When I express that I am upset, they consistently feel upset that they have upset me, and now we are discussing how she is feeling. Women subtly and overtly manipulate men in a toxic manner, and this behavior is often considered normal. Story 18. Starting conflicts after I unknowingly do or say something that triggers her based on her ex's past behavior is a frequent occurrence. At best, I receive a later acknowledgement of why the overreaction happened, and at worst, I feel like I am walking on eggshells, unsure of what to say or not say on a daily basis. Story 19. It is not really disrespectful, but at my job, there are a few tasks that some women refuse to do. They often say, "It's a man's job. We shouldn't have to do those tasks." One day, the manager provided them with a list of women's tasks. And guess what happened? They became upset and started claiming that it is rude and sexist to categorize a job as solely a women's role. Story 20. I work from home and make house calls. My wife's general lack of respect for my time often complicates things. If I need to go to the store to grab a few items for work, it can take her half an hour even when I am ready to leave. Then she wants to browse the store when I need to return to work. What should have taken 30 minutes turns into a loss of productivity lasting several hours with multiple trips. Story 21. This topic is not often discussed, but when women take too long to get ready for an event, it can cause both individuals to be late. Story 22. Discussing intimate topics with friends is not suitable for casual conversations. Her coworkers do not need to know about my private life. Story 23. Viewing us as tools for tasks is acceptable. It is fine to ask for help, but it is not appropriate to have an entitled attitude about it. Story 24. Excuse me, I just want to grab the potato chips, ma'am. Story 25. Running up a large tab on a first date can be problematic. I believe ordering more than 2 or 3 cocktails with someone you have never met is very rude and potentially dangerous. Story 26. I heard about men who are monstrous and predatory, and if you have a penis, you are also considered monstrous and predatory. It is your responsibility to prove otherwise. Story 27. Whenever a man is ill, he might say he has the flu, while women often say, "She's under the weather," or "She's not feeling well, the poor thing." The difference lies in the sympathy given to each. Story 28. Creating a safe space to share trauma, and then using that trauma against us in an argument that has nothing to do with it. Story 29. I found out from my wife that her friend's sister's husband confided in her that he is attracted to transgender individuals. This is information that should never have reached me. This is also the reason I will never tell my wife about my interest in transgender individuals. Story 30. Seeing us as tools. The first thing that upset me at the workplace was that I was always responsible for carrying heavy trash, while the other employees were all women, even though I worked in a separate building. While it was somewhat acceptable for me to handle heavy items, as I was the strongest in the team, there was absolutely no reason for me to be their cleanup person for anything light. Over time, they even stopped thanking me, and their requests became demands because I wasn't really in a position to complain. The second issue is related to my height, which often means I serve as a ladder because the other employees are too lazy to organize themselves a stool or something similar. Story 31. When they treat decent men like threats, or when a man is open about his struggles, they make it all about themselves or see him as weak. Like women, no one is perfect. I've seen it all. Story 32. Casually insulting us without realizing it. The entire discussion about women believing that telling a man their personality is better than their looks is perplexing. Just say you appreciate our personality. Story 33. Your constant focus on your ex and the negativity surrounding him reveals more about you as a person than about him. Story 34. This can apply to anyone, especially in conversation. Everything I say or express must be countered or questioned. It is exhausting when most conversations turn into a debate. Story 35. Not all women do this, but my ex thought it was fine to punch my arm or chest as hard as she could. It was usually just her joking, but if I did that to her, I would probably go to jail. Story 36. The same women who admonish men for making crude comments about women will make crude comments about men. For example, when watching a movie, a shirtless man may receive comments while a scantily clad woman does as well. Story 37. When someone has a bad experience on a date or in a relationship, they stereotype all men and criticize them, claiming they are all the same. I believe this behavior is unpleasant and frustrating. Story 38. Body shaming men, particularly regarding the size of their genitals, involves making unfair generalizations about all men based on a negative experience with just one individual. Story 39. Not treating men like human beings and condemning them for crying when they are sad or expressing joy through dance is harmful. Men face challenges and often feel pressured to act in a masculine way. When they are with you, they choose to be their authentic selves. Being their safe space is an honor. Leave societal judgment behind. Story 40. Not appreciating that work is work too. I understand you are a stay-at-home wife, and there is a lot to be done. Domestic work is important. However, that doesn't mean my job isn't work. I come home after putting in 40 hours, and I hope you have put in a similar amount of work, not just a couple of hours followed by playing a game all day, and then getting upset with me for not helping out enough. I can see your game hours increasing by 30 every week. Story 41. Misandry, sexual abuse, lack of respect for privacy, and the belief that men can read women's minds encompass a wide range of issues, from the trivial to the serious. Story 42. Using your trauma, emotions, past actions, and private life against you in an argument or discussing them with their friends. Story 43. Women often become too comfortable sharing personal stories once you are considered a friend. I knew a colleague who developed a casual friendly rapport with me for about 4 to 5 days. One day, as we were leaving the office together, she launched into a story about an encounter with a man she met on a dating app. It didn't surprise me too much because it's common for people to overestimate the closeness of their relationship and overshare personal experiences. Story 44. Body shaming involves calling individuals not man enough for certain things, assuming and expecting them to conform to conventional masculine roles without themselves embodying those traits, being abusive and justifying such behavior. Story 45. Assuming we are all trying to get your attention, I realize it's fully understandable, but it hurts sometimes, like being attacked unexpectedly because of someone else's actions. Story 46. I am not a fan of being held accountable for all the terrible things I do in her dreams. She is genuinely upset with me for that, and I don't understand why you are laughing. I am very upset about what you did. Story 47. Sometimes they ask questions so foolish that you begin to wonder if we are, in fact, a civilization in general decline, with education increasingly failing us as we immerse ourselves in the empty triviality of social media. So when you respond to a question and provide an answer, they accuse you of condescendingly explaining and using words they do not comprehend. Story 48. Hitting men is not acceptable. Some women believe it is okay to slap or hit a man when he does something offensive, but it is not. This behavior should stop. Story 49. Shaming men for their height, penis size, income, fears, emotions, not fitting masculine stereotypes, or having insecurities is socially normalized. In general, society often allows women to shame men for any perceived inadequacies. Story 50. Not caring what is and isn't inappropriate during an argument, women are familiar with the saying that a man should never hit a woman. They often resort to harsh and vicious tactics that, if they were a man, would have resulted in a violent response. The worst offenders act arrogantly about this behavior. Story 51. My favorite moment is when you hold the door open for a woman, and she acts like you are her doorman. There is absolutely no effort to say thank you or recognize your existence. When I hold a door for a man, he always says thank you. Men do not have that sense of entitlement. Story 52. On many occasions when I have lived with women, their maternal instinct is so ingrained in them that they start treating me like their son. I confront them about this, and it tones down but never completely goes away. For example, I lived with a woman and her son. I always shut the lights off when I leave a room or turn them off when I find them on. But her young son never shuts the lights off. She groups me with him as guilty, saying, "You both need to shut the lights off when you leave a room. What is it with guys?" In another instance, a woman I lived with always accused me of never cutting her grass, but I always did. When she saw it needed to be cut again, it became that I never cut it. So, I decided to cut all the grass except the last little bit. I sat on the front porch, and as soon as I saw her car turn down the street as she returned from work, I ran out and started mowing the last strip so that when she pulled into the driveway, she saw me cutting the grass. Story 53. Speaking as if all men are unworthy is unproductive. That boss energy can be off-putting. People often ask where all the good men have gone, while simultaneously criticizing them and labeling them as unworthy. They want to be treated like royalty, but if they don't receive what they believe they deserve, they move on quickly. Good luck finding a partner who is truly committed with that mindset. Story 54. Treating men like they are only helpers. If something heavy needs to be moved or if a job involves digging or climbing a ladder, it is often seen as a man's responsibility. There is a lack of respect for male boundaries and consent. Sharing private information about a man with her family and female friends is inappropriate. There is a tendency to minimize the negative experiences that men face. While it is true that more men are murdered, assaulted, die in wars, or commit suicide, this is often dismissed with the phrase, "But." Story 55. The way they walk out of a building and let the door hit you in the face without even thinking about it. Story 56. Judging individuals based on aspects they cannot change, such as height or physical attributes, completely disregards their feelings. This behavior involves talking over them and lacking basic respect for them as human beings, ultimately leading to their objectification. Story 57. Assuming that we appreciate you for being kind. It is something that many complain about men doing, but it definitely goes both ways. Story 58. This always frustrates me. I have two young girls, ages 4 and 2. When my wife takes them out, no one says anything. But when I take them out, I often hear a lady say, "Looks like you have your hands full." Story 59. Doing everything they believe is toxic, manipulative, or abusive when men do it reflects the rules for thee but not for me mentality. It's the "I will happily scream at you, but don't you dare raise your voice at me" situations. Honestly, I'm starting to think it's all women. Even the best ones, even the ones I love, act like this from time to time, and they are often not held accountable. Story 60. Groping and touching. I am a male hairstylist, and some women believe it is acceptable to touch me without my consent. We all understand how women feel when men touch them without consent, but it seems to be overlooked when the touching is initiated by a woman. Story 61. There seems to be a situation where some women will touch you and think that it is acceptable. I understand that it is not physically threatening, but that does not make it comfortable. Some things aren't okay to do to people, regardless of who is more physically powerful. Story 62. Making negative and unreasonable assumptions about you based on just a brief glance. Story 63. I'm a male nanny, so don't even get me started. My personal least favorite is the iterations of, "Wow, that's amazing that they trust you, a man with kids." Please stop. Story 64. Talking over you, rambling on about something she considers very important but is not. Story 65. Something I've heard often is the phrase, "small dick energy." Anyone who uses this phrase displays a negative attitude. Story 66. The thing I have had the most problem with is some women trying to sweet-talk me into doing their chores and errands just because I am a man and they are women. Apparently, I look like someone who cares that you didn't set all the dishes and silverware for the party, and now you want me to do it for you while you talk on the phone to your friends for the next 20 minutes. Clarissa. I am going to go find your cat or dog and give it such good pets that it will think about me when you are sleeping tonight. Story 67. Not listening to us when we say that he wants to be more than friends. Keeping score about things. We were intimate 3 times this week, and I'm tired. It's okay to be tired, but keeping track feels like you're just going through the motions. Story 68. I had a former friend who harassed a man all night long despite him saying, "I have a boyfriend, you need to chill out," and "I'm uncomfortable." I confronted her about it, and she completely denied it. However, I have seen the same woman make at least half a dozen accusations of harassment against men in the past year alone. Story 69. Expressing strong affection for someone, then when you show any vulnerability, they lose interest and move on without regard for the hurt they cause. Story 70. When it is clear to both of you that the first date will be the only date due to circumstances beyond anyone's control, it is still expected that the man pays for the entire date. Story 71. How common is it to be called names in private and in front of friends? That was unexpected. It didn't happen often, but when it did, it was unpleasant. Story 72. Assuming that men do not have emotional needs is a common misconception. While most women do not hold this belief, it is among the most disrespectful attitudes some women may express. Story 73. They assume that being us is extremely easy just because of the difficulties faced by women. It's not that we face significantly fewer problems. It's just different challenges. Life may be relatively easy for a wealthy, heterosexual white man, but that generalizes all men into a small percentage of the population, making it sound like the rest of us do not have struggles. Story 74. Thinking she understands my emotions better than I do. I tend not to feel interpersonal things too strongly and have male friends but not very close ones. I have often been told that I am repressing my emotions or just not sharing them, and that the only reason men do not have deep friendships in which they get coffee and talk for hours is because of homophobia. Please take what I'm telling you about my lived experience at face value. Do not make me question my own emotions and friendships or lack thereof. Story 75. One comment I hear often is when I'm with my partner's friends, and they complain about something a man did. They then say things like, "Men are such arseholes," and quickly add, "Not you though, you're great. I'm not particularly upset by it. They are just venting." However, if you replace men with any other identity group, it changes the tone significantly. For example, "Women are such bitches, not you though, you're great." I would never even think that, let alone say it. I certainly wouldn't express that sentiment in the company of a woman I liked or respected. It's directly disrespectful to that person and indirectly disrespectful to the many men who are just trying their best. I understand they mean to say, there are many men who are arseholes, but they should just say that. Also, when women are venting, I sometimes doubt they are presenting the full story. They often portray themselves as angels in their retelling. Story 76. I saw a post on a parenting forum today where a mother was bragging that her 5-year-old son changed the toilet roll in the bathroom without being prompted. She went on about how it showed that not all men were lazy and wouldn't take care of themselves. I called her comment misandrist because it is, and have been downvoted significantly. She is spreading and reinforcing stereotypes, and it's untrue. Story 77. Double standard touching. At my security job, women often touch my hand, back, or left arm when I allow them to enter the building after confirming their identity. It feels disrespectful because I can tell which ones would not be comfortable with me doing the same to a random female security officer. It is my job to read people. Story 78. Expecting us to conform to the stereotype of a stereotypical man. Some examples include commenting on our choice to wear pink, commenting on our physical strength, judging our sensitivity, doing tasks for us that we are fully capable of handling, although they are traditionally considered women's jobs. Story 79. Labeling our boundaries or deal breakers as controlling or insecure is common. On relationship forums, I frequently see reasonable boundaries labeled as controlling, with the person asserting them being labeled as insecure. These are boundaries that any reasonable person would have, such as not being friends with former partners, not openly expressing attraction to others, and not flirting with other people. It is absurd what we are expected to accept in order to ensure that women feel free. Story 80. Assuming all men are dogs, flirtatious, and looking for a casual encounter is absolutely incorrect. Not all men behave the same way. Story 81. Using men as financial supporters has been a concept for some time. I thought women engaged in this behavior back in the early 2000s, but now with social media, it has become more apparent, and it's referred to as foodie calls. The idea is to dine out and take advantage of a man for drinks until he realizes he is being used. Story 82. Shaming. Women say the most hurtful things. You're not a man/you're just like your father. And it is socially accepted. Studies have shown that very hurtful words can cause pain akin to physical harm. Story 83. Australia is at the bottom of the world, but anyone interested in misandry and exploring its extremes should study the country. Story 84. Not acknowledging all the work we do. All the work on the house is expected and rarely acknowledged. The minor chores in the house are met with comments like, "Gee, thanks for not being lazy." Making dinner 2 nights a week is met with, "You're making that?" Maintaining the cars is expected, so no thanks. Bringing flowers home is met with, "Okay, what did you do?" Story 85. It's just the usual sentiment that whatever I do is correct, but when you do the same, it's not acceptable. It can be absolutely infuriating sometimes, but then I remember that I don't need to commit and can enjoy the casual side of dating. Story 86. 2 things. 1. Being naive about other men who openly flirt with them and passing it off as something friendly. Introducing you to another man with whom they used to be in a relationship and expecting you to be comfortable with it. If you are not, you are made to feel like the insecure person. Story 87. Feeling entitled to support and agreement from men can create a situation where, if a man expresses his own ideas or opinions that differ from hers, he is perceived as having done something offensive. Story 88. Doesn't hold any type of conversation with you but chats with your female teammate like they are old friends when they are not. Story 89. Body shaming regarding height, weight, body shape, penis size, and hair is often overlooked and rarely confronted. Story 90. Not seeing individuals for who they are, but rather through the lens of what they can do for others, is a top concern in relationships. Unfortunately, treating them as inferior has become the norm. It is essentially discrimination, and the feminist supremacy movement should be addressed seriously. Story 91. Playing in a man's face who has future plans but does not share, simply because a woman keeps showing her true nature by not being authentic. Story 92. Always trying to make your problems or feelings sound unimportant because they have problems and insecurities too. I don't want to talk to people who always try to bring your problems back to their own. Story 93. I want to say that consent works both ways. However, what is really a pet peeve is listening to feelings in a conversation instead of words. I find that so disrespectful. When she doesn't listen to the words coming out of my mouth, but instead focuses on how she feels hearing them, it leads to moments of petulance based on her assumptions. This reaction is based on what she felt I said, which has nothing to do with the conversation at hand. It gets deep under my skin and feels like mud on my soul. It's not only young women who do this. I've noticed it among older, so-called more mature women too. Honestly, when it comes to emotional maturity, the number of times someone has been around the sun has little to do with it. Story 94. It is disrespectful to expect someone to fix a mess left by others. Your poor choice of associates isn't my problem. Story 95. You're a man but can't work on your own car? You're a man but want to work in an office? You would be handsome if you weren't overweight. A comment I have received multiple times from different women. Open up to me. 2 months later, your insert abusive person, usually a family member, was right. You're worthless, stupid, ugly, etc. This often occurs during a typical disagreement with one of those women who claim to be honest but may have some unresolved issues, like leaving shoes out or not folding laundry. Open up to me. 1 week later, we need to break up. I've lost all respect for you and can't help seeing you in the situation you described, because you asked. Story 96. Publicly posting our private lives is troubling. I saw a post where a man talked about his now-wife sharing on an anonymous chat app how she tried to wake him up, and he wasn't receptive. It's hard to understand a world where a private moment with your partner prompts you to run to the internet to discuss it with strangers. It feels like a violation of privacy. Additionally, I notice many women shaming their partners online for attention. Ironically, when pressed, they often admit to having a loving relationship, which is perplexing and disappointing. If I discovered my wife or partner engaged in such behavior, I would feel deeply violated. Another troubling behavior is sharing private details of your life together with friends. This feels invasive and discouraging, making me reluctant to be open around her. I'm dating her, not her friends. Relationships should not be governed by outside opinions. One particularly disrespectful act is discussing how attractive another man is. It doesn't matter if it's someone encountered briefly, an actor, or even a fictional character. Having a celebrity crush is also inappropriate. The only person you should focus on is your partner. I don't gawk at every woman I encounter, real or fictional, so I expect the same respect in return. Story 97. I agree that when it comes to relationships, it is important to respect both your own feelings and those of others. How is this not a common understanding? However, some people may not care. Sharing personal information on the internet or social media can go too far and should not be done. Age and maturity often play significant roles in this regard, as does a person's character. That said, when it comes to gossip, I am not anyone's secret keeper, nor do I have the ability to predict the future. If someone does not want me to discuss the gossip they shared with me, it would be helpful for them to communicate that clearly. Just saying. Story 98. Knowing someone for years and being close friends with them, only to be constantly treated as just another option instead of a priority, even when you are in an actual committed relationship with them. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.